I'm here. Hit that like button. Let us know who you are as you roll through. Jesus M, saludos to you, to my friend. Anybody who's rolling through, make sure you let us know who you are. Hit that like button. If you do one thing, hit that like button as you come through. I appreciate all the archive views I've been getting. Been off the charts. Getting close to record numbers again, trending towards January. So appreciate that on the channel and appreciate all the love we got on HCP. Episode number 104, but the second time I've been doing it with D-Style, we're over 600 views, I believe, on his channel. We were over 600 views for the previous one earlier. Each week is getting better and better, so appreciate the support getting over there. OJ22, Steven 4722, Broner versus Lundy, WTF 7 years ago. This is boxing. This is what I talk about when I talk about this stuff. What I tell you guys is they give us fights when they're not in demand, and they don't give them to us when they were in demand. This fight was once in demand. Do people understand? Like, Hank Lundy, he's lost 4 straight. Hank Lundy has lost 11 out of his last 20. Hank Lundy has lost, I believe it's 5 out of whatever it is, but 4 straight, he's lost 11 out of his last 20. Broner, he's 1-2-1 in his last 4. These guys are not going. And BLK Prime is in that point when they're getting into the market. They have to overpay fighters with names, right? They have to overpay them. And they're overpaying Broner here. Broner hasn't been a name in a while. He's still a name, but he's well past it. He hasn't been Broner in a while. Broner's last meaningful win in the sport was against Malignaggi a decade ago. Fellas, Broner is done. That's a has-been. That's no longer. Broner is no longer Broner. And I see some people haven't gotten that yet, but if you look at his past ratings on Showtime from the past couple of fights, he's not doing ratings anymore. So this is like celebrity boxing without the celebrity. This is like the seniors tour. You know, like when golfers get on the seniors tour to still get some rounds in and make some money. That's what this is at this point. Okay. And I'm fine with it. It's actually a decent matchup in that they're both same points in their career. They both talk a lot of trash, but who's going to buy this for $40 is my question. And on top of that, was Blair Cobbs not available? Was there not a more meaningful guy available for Adrian Broner than a guy coming off of 4 straight losses and has lost 11 out of his last 20? This is Hank Lundy, fellas. Hank Lundy. Linux was best. Appreciate you swinging through. Broner and Lundy on that Social Security system. They're on their descent. And this fight is what it is. I don't read too much into it. It's 2 guys, same point in their career. I just asked myself, who's going to pay $40 for this? And who are the people who think that there's a pathway forward for an Adrian Broner? Like realistically. And on top of that, it paints an ugly picture of fighters who have to fight well past their prime when they likely should have retired with a lot of money by now. But they don't have a lot of money by now because they didn't manage their money well, and they have to continue to fight. They have to continue to go after that bag. And I asked myself, who are the fans out there who are going to support this at a level where it has to be sustainable for BLK Prime? At a level where you can pay Adrian Broner, they're saying 8 figures, whatever it is, 10 million plus over 3 fights. How are you going to do that in 2023? What's the pathway forward? So that's what we got for Adrian Broner versus Hank Lundy. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We got Eubank Jr. this weekend. We may or may not get to that. Plenty of time for the rest of the week to talk about that and the betting odds. We got Tank pay-per-view buys. They're saying 61,000. 61,000 pay-per-view buys for Tank, whether you want to believe that or not. But what we do know for sure is the replay on Showtime, Championship Boxing, peaked at 124,000. And I'll give you some numbers for comparison from a decade ago to tell you how far we've fallen in America as far as ratings for top boxing on HBO and Showtime. HBO now out of the business. but we compare it to Showtime's numbers right now and Showtime's numbers a decade ago, it paints an ugly picture of where we're at compared to where we were, say, a decade ago. So when he does 124,000 and people say, no, you're wrong about the 61,000. Why doesn't the Weasel come out and tell us why we're wrong? Why doesn't the Weasel come out and give us the numbers? Why doesn't PBC come out with an announcement saying, no, 61,000 is wrong. Here's the concrete number. So my question for the people who don't believe the 61,000 is, what number are you going to believe, number one? And number two, is there a case of a pay-per-view being seen by more people on pay-per-view than on the replay? Is there a case for that? I don't think there is. And I'll paint that picture in a little while when I go over the numbers from 2022 or 2012 when it comes to HBO and Showtime. Generally speaking, the pay-per-view is seen by less people live than it is on the replay the weekend after. So if it peaked at 124,000, what number are you going to throw out there if 61,000 isn't the real number? So more on that. Boots Ennis being dropped by the WBO in the rankings. He's being dropped in the WBO in the rankings because he's the IBF interim. I understand. The people on Twitter are telling me he's dropped in the WBO because of the chat. I get he's an interim champ and he's being dropped by the WBO. I'm going to paint a picture as to why I think he went the IBF route instead of the WBO route for all of the Boots Ennis degenerate extremist fans who think that Boots Ennis can do no wrong and Boots Ennis is being ducked by every single fighter in the world. He could have made things easier for himself, and he didn't in this case, and that's why I just don't see anything going for him in 2023 other than some stay busy fights. So we're going to go over all of that. Some Bud Crawford talk. Tank Davis pay-per-view buys in a way to 122. We're going to talk about all that stuff here on this show. Man, whoever buys this is just, I don't know. Terrible fight. They know Broner will lose to any young guy. 61,000 Tank's a star. I read the other day that 70% of the revenue from Mayweather Jr. PAC was pay-per-view. 61,000 is totally believable to me. And in fact, I actually thought it was going to do like 40 to 50. So 61, that's about where, it's ballpark. It's ballpark. The reports, Fury Chisora did 500,000. I find that hard to believe. But what it paints is a picture of a dead pay-per-view market. There's no pay-per-view market other than the Ginger King. The Ginger King is still out there doing 500,000 plus in pay-per-view buys. His pay-per-views are obviously more expensive, being that the B-sides are stronger. He's a generous A-side. He's paying his B-sides more money. He has to do more pay-per-view buys in order to sustain that, but he's making $50 million per fight. Putting anybody in the same breath as Canelo as far as a cash cow is embarrassing, especially Tank Davis, who can't sell pay-per-views. His live gates are good. He can sell out multiple venues, but that's not anything out of the ordinary from what we've seen in generation past in boxing. You had several fighters throughout the sport at any one point in time who can sell out multiple venues throughout a country. Tank is another one, but Tank Davis is not a pay-per-view superstar. He's just not. He's just not. And I hear Oscar De La Hoya, they met his deadline yesterday. Good to see. I think what that was Oscar De La Hoya putting pressure on Tank's team, on Showtime, on PBC. Get me something in writing. The court date is next month. We don't know how that's going to go. We know, we've seen internally what your pay-per-view buys are. We're getting cold feet here. Give us something in writing. I think this was Oscar putting pressure on them. And we knew they would get him the contract, right? And they got him a contract. But the big question, the big hurdle left is next month. Court date. Do we get past that? And for Tank Davis, it's going to be uncharted waters, right? And by the way, y'all hit that like button. But it'll be uncharted waters when it comes to Ryan Garcia. Why? Ryan Garcia is now sitting at plus 210, a 2.5 to 1 underdog. Tank Davis hasn't seen numbers like that for his B-side in a long time. It's been a long time since Tank Davis has had close to even odds fight. It's been a long time. It's been a long time coming. So competitively, it's different, but it's also different because you have a B-side that's expensive. and Ryan Garcia. So this pay-per-view, it has to sell. Tank versus Ryan has to sell to make money, unlike his other ones. $61,000 for Tank is manageable because the B side is so inexpensive and the B side is so overmatched. And this is where the Tank Davis theorem falls apart, is you explain to people going in that Hector Garcia is a 130-pounder. And then I have people sending me pictures. Oh, he's 130-pounder, but look how big he is. He's actually bigger than Tank. He's actually he's actually a good 135-pounder, even though he's never fought that. Forget that he's never fought at 135. Forget that. Look at the pictures. And he's actually a lot better than you think. He's a lot better than the betting odds are giving him. He's a lot better than a 16-1 underdog. So you say, okay, you're building him up. So then what happens? The pay-per-view numbers come out accidentally and they flop. The pay-per-view flops. The fight flops. So then they start the narrative that they backtrack, they spin. Hector Garcia, he's not all that good. Like he was inexpensive. He was overmatched. Of course, the pay-per-view is not going to do that good. Look at who the B-side was. Exactly. That's what we were trying to tell you going into the fight. But they want to have their cake and eat it too. When Hector Garcia, when it's beneficial for them to say Hector Garcia is a great fighter, they'll say it. When it's beneficial for them to say, no, Hector Garcia, he's actually not all that good. He's not a name. They'll say it. They'll talk out of both sides of their mouth, and you just let them talk. Let them talk. Let them keep talking. Let them keep talking. The frustrating part is they don't know how ignorant they are. They don't know what they don't know. So they're not even going to see themselves fall into the traps, but just let them keep talking. And let the people who know what's what watch them make fools of themselves. That's where the Tank Davis theorem falls apart. But when we see 61,000 pay-per-view buys, and when we see replay peaking at 124,000, replay peaking at 124,000, I don't think people can put into perspective how bad that is. If we pull numbers from 2012, and I pulled them, of what Showtime and HBO Boxing was doing as far as ratings back then. And keep in mind, Tank Davis is a big star, right? He's a superstar. He's a superstar. Salute, Calix. I really wish the narratives of some YTB channels would end wishful thinking, but it's sad to see the lies. It is sad. It is sad. And we try to follow the truth here. That's our narrative. Boxing fans talking to boxing fans about how we can further our agenda as boxing fans. So when we see a possible run coming forward in the spring where we could possibly have 7 pay-per-views in a 9 to 10 week period. And on top of that, Broner versus Lundy, which is going to be a $40 pay-per-view in February leading up to that. So you have a 3-month period in which you'll possibly have 10 pay-per-views. It's absurd. It's absurd. You're having more pay-per-views than non-pay-per-views when it comes to top-level fights. It's sad. And then you'll have fans tell you that if you want the pay-per-views to fail, you're actually anti-boxing. You want boxing to fail by extension just because you want the pay-per-view model to fail. No, it's the opposite. We want a sustainable sport that's good for all fighters involved, A-side fighters, B-side fighters, contenders, prospects. We want the whole picture to be sustainable. We want it to be vital. And in order to do that, you need this model to crumble and fail. This is not a sustainable model. You cannot have 8 pay-per-views in a 3-month period. You cannot have 7 pay-per-views in a 9-week period. You can't. You can't have Benavidez Plant pay-per-view, Ryan Tank pay-per-view, Spence Keith pay-per-view, Deontay versus Andy pay-per-view, Andy Butt Tattoo pay-per-view. You can't have that. Back to back to back to back. And on top of that, Canelo versus Ryder, possibly May 5th pay-per-view. And on top of that, there was another pay-per-view in May. And on top of that, you could have Broner versus Lundy pay-per-view. You can't continue to have these pay-per-views back to back to back. You can't put every single fight between named fighters on pay-per-view. But you can, they say. You can. It's sustainable, and you shouldn't complain about it. And if you complain about it, you're anti-fighter, you're anti-boxing. You want these people to fail. No. I want them to succeed. And it may take longer It will take longer for them to succeed because this has to crumble before they're able to do it, before it's sustainable. But it has to crumble. You can't have a model in which you're building a country club sport to where you're putting everything behind the subscription. And on top of that, you're putting it behind an added paywall behind the subscription. This used to be a lot easier for us a decade ago, right? Showtime, HBO, ESPN, Friday Night Fights. We knew where to go to get access to our fighters. And we saw them more because they were more active. We knew we paid with our cable, we got a bundle discount for HBO. It might have been $7 a month. Showtime, you might have been able to get both of them for $11 a month, $15 a month with your bundle. Now, cable has collapsed. Now, everything is a la carte. And since everything is a la carte, they're pushing you to all different types of carts. DAZN, Showtime app, ESPN Plus, etc., Fight TV, etc. But as I look at these numbers, and I see Tank Davis, Hector Garcia, 124,000. Peak replay. Oh, it's just the replay. Don't worry about it. Historically, the replay has done better than the pay-per-view. Historically. Better numbers than the actual pay-per-view the week before, the replay. So if it peaked at 120, that's the peak, 124K, we know it did less than that. So 61,000 is believable. So if we have a superstar in the sport, they're telling us that Tank Davis is a superstar in the sport. He's a cash cow. How is it? And it's not like the 124,000 that peaked didn't watch the pay-per-view. Some of those guys, that shared audience. So let's say 150 people watched Tank versus Hector Garcia combined. It doesn't paint a good picture, especially when you look at it historically. Let me give you the numbers from 2012. This is a decade ago, pulled from HBO and Showtime. Cotto versus Trout, 1.4 million on Showtime. Guerrero versus Berto, 1.1 million. Chavez Jr. versus Marco Antonio Barrero, 1.9 million. This is in comparison to Tank Davis's 124K. I'm just putting into perspective how bad this is. I'm just putting into perspective for the people who don't believe that we're in a dwindling market in America. And PBC is promoting to a dwindling market because PBC, by extension, is now a domestic player. PBC isn't going to Saudi Arabia to put on fights, like, say, Bob and Trust Fund Eddie are. And even Oscar is talking about it. They're not going to the UK to do fights. Stephen Fulton Jr. is not going to go to Japan where the money is to fight Inoue at 122. He's not going to go. PBC is staying in America and catering to a dwindling market. Chavez Jr. versus Andy Lee, 1.6. And you can say Chavez Jr. was a big star. Chavez Jr. had a huge base. So does Tank, right? That's what I've been told. Tank is a superstar, right? Just like Chavez Jr. Broner versus Acevedo, 1.4 million. Donaire versus Arce, lower weight classes, 1.3 million compared to 124 peak. A replay, Pacquiao versus Marquez 4, replay, 1.4 million. Khan versus Molina, Showtime, 616,000. That's Khan versus Molina, 616,000. Showtime. Now, Santa Cruz was on CBS, but that did 1.5 households. Ward versus Dawson. Ward versus Dawson, 1.5. Mayweather versus Cotto replay, 1.3 million. Morales versus Garcia, lower weight classes, 1.2 million. Maidana versus Alexander, not big names, 1.1 million. Broner versus DeMarco, not a strong B-side, 1.1 million. Martinez versus Macklin, 1.1 million. Canelo versus Josecito on Showtime, 1.1 million. This is what we came from a decade ago. These are the ratings we were putting up. Look at the ratings we're putting up now. And you can say Chavez Jr. was a star. Pacquiao was still around. He was a star. Mayweather was around. Mayweather was a star. But that's the point, fellas. Broner was a budding star at the time. We had stars in the sport, real stars in the sport. Who are the stars now putting up these numbers? Who are they? Canelo? Anthony Joshua? Who's putting up these numbers now? We know Tank's not. Supposed superstar. Is he putting up these numbers? I don't see it. 124K peak. Yeah, but he fought Hector Luis Garcia. Y'all told me Hector Luis Garcia was a good fight. This was not a tune-up. It's a dangerous fight. It's a good fight. Hector Luis Garcia is a champion. Look how big he looks in this picture. He's not just a 130-pound champion. He's a legit 135-pounder. Why didn't it show up in the ratings? 61K sounds high. If fans supported big fights on pay-per-view, meaning them a huge financial success, but refused to pay for average fights, the money men would get the message about what fights to make. And this is the point. And this is always the rebuttal to the guys saying, one, stop complaining about the pay-per-views. And number two, if you complain about the pay-per-views and you want the pay-per-views to flop, you're hurting the fighters, you're hurting the sport. No, it's the opposite. We want the sport to succeed. We want stars developed. We want Errol Spence Jr. to be a legit star. And if Errol Spence Jr. was a legit superstar, he wouldn't be advised by his advisor to not take guaranteed money as the A side in a super fight. For the love of God, his advisor advised him to take $0 guaranteed dollars in a super fight as the A side. And you're telling me he's a superstar. Errol Spence Jr. is the king of Fort Worth County. He's the mayor. He's the cash cow in North Texas. Well, why is he not getting guaranteed money in a super fight? Explain it to me. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Why is he being advised by his advisor to not take guaranteed money as the A side in a super fight? Explain it to me. Explain it to the chat. Explain it to my high intelligent chat. Somebody who disagrees with us. Explain to us why Errol Spence Jr.'s advisor advised him to take $0 guaranteed dollars, and it's been verified by Errol and Bud publicly, to not take guaranteed money as the A side in a super fight, but he's a superstar. Explain to me how a superstar who you told us was fighting a strong B side in Hector Luis Garcia did 61,000 pay-per-view buys unofficially. And if that's the wrong number, I apologize. But one thing I do know is that the average ratings for this fight did a little over 100,000. And I know historically that the replay does more than the actual pay-per-view as far as ratings. So we know it's under 100,000 buys. So if it's not 61,000, it's not far from it. Explain it to us like we're 5 years old. Why a superstar and how a superstar can average these pay-per-view numbers in the sport. Explain it to us. Explain it to us how. And if your answer is being pirated, fair enough, but that doesn't, like Showtime Championship Boxing the weekend after. It didn't do good numbers. That's not pay-per-view. They're doing things wrong and need to know what won't work. Simple as that. Listen to the consumer. I'm not saying the customer is always right, but you got to listen to the consumer. The Super Bowl isn't pay-per-view and people think Broner versus Lundy. It's pay-per-view, can't fix stupid. Most definitely they shouldn't, but during pandemic, apps start seeing where they could get, and because PBC was limiting fighters in 2021, only 32% of PBC boxers out of 200 fought that year. And we've talked about the growing trend of inactive fighters in the sport. And we've been over that ad nauseum. Top 10 pound for pound fought a combined 14 times last year. Top 50 pound for pound fought a combined 69 times last year. Top 100, according to ESPN, fought a combined 130-something times last year. So we're at a 1.3 average, whether you go top 10, top 50, top 100. And it expands out even further. And it trickles down all the way to prospects, to where we don't know where to go to watch the prospects now. Number one, they're buried on undercards. They're not on main events of ESPN Friday Night Fights anymore. Our co-main events. They're not on Showbox consistently. We don't know where to go to see them, and we don't see them often enough. And that's here in America. But if you compare and contrast to the UK, they know. I've talked to fight fans who travel over there from America, and they say the venue is packed on the undercard. They know who these fighters are coming up. They watch them through the domestic level, graduate to the universal level. They watch them go up the rankings, and they become fans of these fighters because they know these fighters earlier on. We don't know that in America. We don't know who these fighters are anymore. The casuals sure as hell don't. And if you look at celebrity boxing, they're doing a lot of things right. For the hardcore boxing fans who are complaining about celebrity boxing, I got news for you. We should be taking a lot of what they're doing and mimicking it. Their fighters are active. KSI's active. Jake Paul's active. These guys are fighting. Pepper Poppy, whatever his name is, he's active. He's knocking guys out and he's active. People know who he is. He's built up a celebrity from a micro level, and now he's exploding on the macro level. And he's staying in people's faces. He's giving them what they want. Celebrity boxing is giving people what they want. They're active. They're following a WWE model in which they're calling each other out after fights. They're getting in fights in the stands and talking trash to each other back and forth, and they're actually making the fights. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. They're actually giving their fans what they want to see. Unlike the hardcore boxing model, in which when the fight is in demand, nope, let it marinate. But I really want to see, no, shut up and stop complaining. But I just want to know, shut up. We don't want to hear from you. You show up, you buy the apps, you buy the pay-per-views, and you sit there and you shut up. We're going to give you the fight when we want to see the fight. We're not going to give you the fight when it's in demand. We're going to give it to you when it's not in demand. Tank versus Ryan should have happened by now, fellas. For all the people out there that are giddy, it should have happened by now. Bud versus Errol should have happened 5 years ago. 4 years ago. Errol versus Keith. Errol versus Yoga Matt Keith should have happened 4 years ago. It should have happened in 2018. And it should have happened at 147. Instead, we're giving it to you in 2023 when there's no demand. And by the way, it's not for a belt. That's hilarious. Hilarious. I love seeing that. Like the WBA grants Errol permission. Errol's team, after Errol says, I'll never fight Keith. Never. I'll never fight Keith. It's not going to happen. Al, behind Errol's back, I'm sure, elevates Keith in the rankings or gets him elevated. A lot of little side hustle going on. And in doing so, after he does that, this is the best part, and it always makes me laugh. He said, no, we're not going to do it over the belts. We're going to do it at 154. And then the WBA comes along and says, and then Al and Errol by extension say, grant us an exception to fight this fight at 154 and keep our belts at 147. And the WBA says, okay, there you go. Here's your exception. Fight that fight at 154. You can keep your belts at 147. So he keeps his belts at 147, even though he's not going to fight at the weight for the belts. He's fighting his mandatory at 147, at 154, and holding on to his belts. It's amazing. Amazing. So in doing so, the WBA says, but you got 60 days to come to an agreement with Bud Crawford. And if you don't do that, you got to fight the winner of Virgil versus Stanionis, which we don't even know if it's going to happen. So yeah, sure, WBA. I'm sure you're going to hold that to him. Hold him to that. But I'm sure there's already a plan here to move up to 154. I don't know. There's some sort of plan going on already. They're hedging their bets. Let's keep our belts at 147. Let's fight this fight at 154. Let's see what happens. Let's see how good we look at 154. If we look great, let's stay there. Let's devise a further plan. Let's devise a plan further to blame everything on Bud. We're going to blame everything on Bud here. We're going to say, we're just let us fight this key fight, Bud. Stay there, sit there. We'll circle back. We'll spin the block, right? We'll spin this huge block. And what happens? Bud, who has to make a mandatory defense, is going to go and make another fight. And if we're looking at the rankings, it possibly could be Alexis Rocha, and I'll explain why in a minute. But in doing so, Errol's team is going to say, Bud didn't wait. Now Bud's busy and we can't do that fight. We just can't do that fight. And I don't know if Virgil versus Stanionis makes sense, so maybe we'll just vacate the belts. The belts should have been vacated by now anyway. For the love of God, why does this goes back to what I was talking about with celebrity boxing? They get things moving. They're moving. They're ramping things up. With boxing, it's hurry up and wait. Wait. And it's the sanctioning body's job to speed things up when these power brokers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. At PBC, they believe the zero keeps them relevant, so they will regularly take 1 to 200K pay-per-view, then risk a loss. Bad business in some case. They certainly need to give free-to-air boxing back in America to expose the public to see these guys as they develop their careers. True, I'll correct above. Regular was the wrong word to use. I'm at work, missed the beginning. Salute to my guy Nando. And y'all make sure to hit that like button as y'all stroll through. In UFC, a well-known kickboxing guy called Pereira joined and fought the most dominant middleweight in UFC history on his third fight. He won. That would never happen in boxing. They marinated to death. And they would. They would. But you look at Boots Ennis. And I got Boots Ennis fans coming at me on Twitter now because I pulled up the ratings. And let me see. Let me pull up those ratings real quick. Let's see what we got. Ryan Garcia doing the PBC a favor. Some Wizard of Oz stuff going on at PBC Showtime. That's right. And look, for the people who are denouncing Ryan still right now, I get it up to this point, but you need to realize something. And this is when you need to be able to read the stitches on the fastball. This fight with Tank wouldn't be happening if Ryan didn't put so much pressure on this fight to happen. Neither side wanted this fight to happen. Al didn't want it to happen. When Leonard was in the picture, he didn't want it to happen. Tank's agnostic to all this. As long as money's coming in and falling on his lap, I don't think Tank cares who he wants to fight. He said that. They asked him that on one of these podcasts. Did you knock on Al's door? Did you knock on Floyd's door? Did you knock on Leonard's door and demand these fights? No. I didn't demand anything. The money's falling. The minimums are falling in my lap. Why am I going to demand fights? What is this? What is this? I beat everybody anyway. I'll beat everybody. Why do I need to demand fights? I'm the fighter. So Tank is agnostic to what's going on anyway. Ryan was the sole figure in this whole thing pushing for this fight to happen. He's the one going on social media, Instagram, Twitter, saying, this is why boxing's in a bad spot. DAZN, Showtime, Al, Fake Abs, Oscar, none of them want to make this fight. We need to get this fight done. I want this fight. Make the fight. He's showing up at clubs, getting his chain snatched. For the love of God, this dude's sacrificing. And he got the fight done for April. Hopefully it happens for him. I hope it happens. You know, we'll see what happens with the court date. I still am not excited for it until we get past this court date. I'm sure Ryan is putting pressure on Oscar to go out there and say, get me a signed contract. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Court dates, bad pay-per-view numbers. Go out there and get me a signed contract, please. This is all too delicate. Give me a signed contract. I'm sure that's what that was about this weekend. You got to be able to read the stitches on the fastball to see this stuff. And you got to be blind. You got to not want to see some of this stuff to not see it with the PBC. Let me pull up this screen share real quick. Present. Let's see. Screen share. I'm going to pull up the rankings. And I'm pulling them up for a reason. And y'all let me know if y'all see this on the left-hand side. That's the updated rankings for the WBO. January updated rankings from WBO. And the reason I bring it up is whose name is not at the top anymore. Somebody put in the chat, whose name is not at the top anymore. Shout out my guy Lukey. What up, Calix? We get a Q1 schedule ever for any promoter in January. And I agree, like Lukey. That's what I've been saying. I'm called a hater once again. Is why am I getting some sort of rough draft schedule from these promoters of a possible scenario in which we have 7 pay-per-views in 9 weeks? That's not even counting Broner versus Hank. That's not even counting that $40 pay-per-view. Why am I getting that? And why am I not entitled to complain about that when I'm still paying for it? And you're telling me, what is 85? Let's say it's $85 after tax, 75 plus tax. That might be 90, but let's round down to 85. 85 times 7. You want me to pay close to $600 for these pay-per-views in a 2-month period, 2.5-month period. And I'm supposed to be okay with that. And for the love of God, man, either these dudes had to be seriously rich on boxing Twitter who are telling me to stop complaining about this, or they got the hack fire stick. It's one of the two. It's one of the two. Because you can't put this sort of onus on the boxing fan to sustain this sport, to support these fighters at this dollar value during an unofficial recession. You can't do it. You can't do it. You're putting too much on our back at this point. Somebody else has to take some of this weight off of us. Power brokers, whoever it is, fighters, y'all need to start stepping up. It's time. You got to start stepping up. You got to do something else. We got to deviate. We've got to change course here because this ain't it. It's not it. It's just not it. Shout out my guy D-Style. And I threw out HCP numbers earlier. The HCP numbers are strong. We'll be back on Monday on D-Style's channel. Y'all make sure to check that out. And this is the answer right here, Mr. T, Boots Ennis. Boots Ennis is no longer at the top of the WBO rankings, and we know why. And the highly intelligent chat knows why, is he's the IBF interim champion now, and a champion from a sanctioning body is not going to be on the rankings anymore. And I have people, Boots Ennis fans, telling me that. When I say Boots Ennis is dropped by the WBO, I know why he's dropped by the WBO. It's because he is the IBF interim. I get it. But why does he have the IBF interim, and why didn't he petition the WBO? That's the question I have. And maybe my highly intelligent chat can answer that question. Why is it that Boots Ennis, who's being ducked by everybody and their grandma, right? Why is it that he took the IBF route, not the WBO route? Why is that? Why is it? Throw out some answers. Why is it? Why is it he went the IBF route and not the WBO route? Why is it that everybody seems to be taking an easier route that does not lead to one certain person? There's a certain person on this route over here that involves a WBO that everybody seems to be avoiding. And this certain person, I was told for 4+ years that was on the wrong side of the street. And that's why he wasn't getting the fights. I've been told recently that the fights actually would have been easier to make had Bob Arum just guaranteed him his money and Al guaranteed Errol his money, or Al guaranteed Danny his money. The fights would have been easier to make. Duh. That's what I've been saying for 5 years. You actually assume less risk. This guy guarantees this guy's money. This guy guarantees this guy's money. We make the fight. We work together. We all like money, right? Everybody likes money. We make the fight. But what happens? They don't make the fight. And then all these guys seem to want to go the non-WBO route. So Boots Ennis goes the IBF route. And in doing so, I'm being told that, yeah, he was going the IBF route because he got access to Errol and it's a bigger fight than Bud. Fair enough. Errol's a bigger star than Bud. Everybody agrees with that. I agree with that. Everybody agrees that Errol is a bigger star and bigger name than Bud. Everybody agrees with that. Nobody disagrees, right? Errol's the king of Fort Worth County, king of Denton, Texas. We know. We get it. He's a North Dallas cash cow. We get it. But does Boots Ennis actually have access to Errol Spence now? No. You know who has access to Errol now? It's Yoga Matt Keefe in a non-title fight at 154. And he was granted permission by the WBO to keep his belt at 147. Granted permission. And I'm sure the IBF, WBO, or IBF, WBC won't be stripping his belts either. So he'll fight Yoga Matt Keefe at 154 for no belts, keep his belts at 147, and this locked division at 147 will remain locked. It's going to remain locked tight. And then when Bud is forced to honor his mandatory, which looks like it's going to be Alexis Roach at this point, all of the Bud haters, all of the Errol lovers, all of the Al lovers, all of the Boots lovers will be like, oh my God, Bud's fighting another bum. He's fighting another bum. Oh my God, why is he fighting another bum? No, Bud's fighting another bum. Look at this dude. Look, he's fighting another bum. He's ducking everybody. Bud's fighting another bum. Look at this dude. Alexis Roach. I can't even pronounce his name. I can't even pronounce this dude's name. Never heard of him. Alexis Roach. I don't know who that is. Don't know who it is. He's just like that Av or whatever his name is. The bum. I told you for years the welterweight is the most talented division in boxing, and I don't care if Av or whatever his name's top 10 in that most talented division in boxing. He's still a bum. He's still a bum because Bud fought him. So when this obvious scenario in 2023 plays out, when Bud fights a guy that people don't want to see him fight because Bud, you told us, Bud doesn't have the options that Errol has. You told us that. Errol's the king of Fort Worth County. He's the king of Denton, Texas. He's the cash cow. 38,000 in Dallas. None of those were comps. Huge live gate. 800 million pay-per-view buys. Bigger than Canelo. He'd kill Canelo at 164. Kill him. He's the king of Fort Worth County. You've told us this time and time again. So when Bud doesn't have the options that Errol has, Bud's got to take what he can get. Apples, oranges. Apples, oranges. So when Errol's advisor advises him to take $0 guaranteed dollars as the A-side, as the cash cow, king of Fort Worth County, king of Denton, Texas, 38,000, Jerry's World, 800 gazillion pay-per-view buys, bigger than Canelo, will kill Canelo at 164. When his advisor advises him to take $0 guaranteed dollars in a super fight as a superstar, I have to ask questions, but apparently to you guys, that's not funny at all. It's not funny at all. Not funny. No, we just got to take their word for it. And I hate, I would love to talk about fights. I would love to talk about stylistic matchups. Would love it. Love it. I would love to talk about stylistic matchups. I would love to look at these rankings right here and say, oh, Virgil's at the top. We'll do Bud versus Virgil next. Nope. You got to wait. Boots is still at the top because Boots took the WBO route, which would have been smarter if he wanted the bigger fight because Bud is more accessible than Errol. And it's a makeable fight because Boots is not with PBC. We do the fight on Showtime. Bud's a free agent. It's a non-Al Heyman fighter. We get it done. But no, we go the IBF route. And since Boots is not with PBC, but he has to fight PBC fighters because he's with Showtime, Boots has an exclusive contract with Showtime. So he only has access to PBC fighters. And Al is not going to feed his PBC fighters to a non-PBC fighter. So Boots will continue to get the workaround. And as Boots continues to get the workaround, he'll start to look around and ask questions. Why did I take the IBF route? I'm asking the same question. Why did you take the IBF route? Errol's at the top. You're not going to fight Errol. I don't know how many ways I could tell you this. Errol versus Boots is not happening. It's not happening. For the people who are saying, well, Errol can fight Boots, Boots can move up the rankings and fight Errol, it's not happening. Errol's not going to fight Boots. Errol's likely not even going to fight the Virgil versus Stanionis winner. Errol is likely moving up to 154 before he gives a young lion a shot. I don't know what else to tell you. Errol versus Boots. Hello, McFly. Errol versus Boots is not happening. So taking the IBF route, which leads to a guy you're not going to fight, I don't get it. I'm sorry. I don't understand it. I've been asking this question for 6 months. Why did this dude take the IBF route instead of WBO route? Explain it to me. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. The answer to this question that I'm posing, I know the answer to it. The answer is the answer to every question for the past 5 years when it comes to welterweight. They don't want to fight the Omaha Boogeyman. They don't. It's an easier route to take to say, I'm ducked by everybody. Nobody wants to fight me. I'm Boots Ennis. I'm the greatest pound-for-pound talent that we've seen since Roy Jones. I'm the greatest pure welterweight we've seen since Sugar Ray Leonard. I don't have to fight the fights because mythically I beat everybody at welterweight. Nobody can touch me. I actually glide through the ring. I walk on water. My feet don't even touch the ring. I don't have to fight anybody. I'm Boots Ennis. I'm the theoretical champion. So I can continue going on saying I'm ducked, fight once or twice per year against guys like Karen, go the IBF route. And I know when I go the IBF route, what will happen. If I don't know, my team knows. Errol Spence eventually vacates these belts. They become vacant. I become vacant champion against a guy who is not named Bud Crawford. It's the easier route. They're all going the easier route, which does not involve Bud Crawford. Bud Crawford Drive is the street in the neighborhood that nobody wants to walk down at night, right? It's a dangerous street. Bud Crawford Drive, nobody goes there. Nobody goes there. You're going to get jacked up if you go over there. Don't go there. Go around it. Go around it. It's easier that way. Go around it. When people are giving you directions through the neighborhood, they say, yeah, your GPS is going to want to take you down Bud Crawford Drive, but don't do that. Don't do that. Why? No, just trust me. Just don't do that. So what we're going to do is once you reach that corner on Bud Crawford Drive, you take a right. You hang a right there. You go around. It's going to take you about a half mile out of your way, but you're still going to want to take that. It's going to get you to where you need to get quicker, and it's going to be much easier. You're not going to hit any potholes. You're not going to have your tires jacked up, your shocks jacked up. It's going to get you there. It's actually going to get you. It's going to seem longer, but it's going to get you there quicker. Boots and his team know that. They want that easy vacant route. They want the easy vacant route. For the love of God, like, is Stevie Wonder still, like, Stevie Wonder could see this if he's still alive. If Helen Keller was still alive, she could still see this. Like, Helen Keller would be like I can't even see the rankings, guys, but I could still see, like, these guys are going any other route but the route that leads to Bud Crawford. Like, guys, I'm blind over here, right? Helen Keller, I'm blind, but I can still see it. Can you not see it? You have to not want to see it to not see it at this point. You have to not want to see it. We'll get Ortiz versus Bud this year. I hope so. Put that in Dallas, Texas. If Ortiz doesn't want to wait for Stanionis, and Bud's obviously available, and if we look at those WBO rankings, and Virgil's team wants to say, hey, it's not happening over here. Let me petition to get this fight for the WBO, whatever. But Yoga Matt Keefe's obviously not going to fight the fight. As of right now, it's not Virgil. So Alexis Rocha next. Is that what we're going to get? Instead of getting Errol versus Bud in 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, all these years it should have happened had we not had a clear obstructionist pulling strings at the welterweight division. Now it looks like we're going to get Earl, King of Denton, Texas, mayor of Fort Worth County, over versus Yoga Matt Keefe at 154 for no belts, and possibly Bud Crawford versus Alexis Rocha in a mandatory. This is disgusting. This is disgusting, and this is what this sport's come to. And I have dudes out here telling me it's not out of the ordinary at all to fork over an extra $600 on top of your subscriptions to pay for 7 pay-per-views during a 9-10 week period. Stop complaining about it. I've thrown out this comparison in the past. It's like I go to a restaurant, I sit down, I eat, then I see that table, that table, that table, that table. Just leave and not pay the bill. They just skip the check. And then they watch them walk out. And then I'm sitting here with my food and I'm like, check, please. And the check is higher than it should have been because that person skip the check. And then I see these people outside and they tell me, I tell them, like, what y'all do? My food was expensive. Y'all skip the check? And they're like, yeah, we bought it for free, you stupid sucker. You should have skipped the check too. Well, I paid for my food, and I should be able to complain since I paid. No, stop complaining. Stop complaining. Stop. We don't need to complain about pay-per-views because we have hack fire sticks. So we don't need to complain about it. And I'm sitting here wondering how all of this is sustainable. How in the world is this sustainable? How in the world? How is any of this sustainable? How do you keep going with this? How do you keep going with this? I like to thank Al Heyman too. Al Heyman and then God. Al comes first, right? And for you dudes out there on Twitter that keep doing this and saying Boots went that route, he's going to fight Errol. Errol's a bigger name. Jesus will be back before Boots and Errol fight. I'm just telling you. Keep waiting for that Earl versus Boots fight. All you want. Keep waiting for it. Keep waiting for it all you want. You'll see Tank do 1 million pay-per-view buys before you see that fight. Bud has an automatic mandatory with the WBO. Why wouldn't he take it? I don't know. These are all the questions. And I've got confirmation Stevie is still alive. So Stevie could see this. Stevie can't see these rankings, but he could see why Boots isn't there. It's the street. Like, you don't go down Bud Crawford Avenue. You don't drive through the neighborhood, the welterweight neighborhood, and drive down. Well, you don't drive down Bud Crawford Avenue. Everybody knows what happens if you drive down Bud Crawford Avenue. Everybody knows. That's why you don't do it. You don't drive down Bud Crawford Avenue. You hang a right. You drive a half mile out of the way, but you don't drive down Bud Crawford Avenue because you don't get to the other side. You don't get there. Bud Crawford Avenue is it's the most dangerous block in the neighborhood. You stay away from it. Drive down Errol Spence Drive. If they even access it, you have Al Heyman's arm. It's a gated community. Errol Spence Jr. neighborhood. It's a gated community. You get there, Al Heyman has his arm out. The code doesn't work. The code doesn't work. The code doesn't work. Al Heyman is a security guard. He's got his arm out. You are not getting past it. You're not getting on Errol Spence Drive. Unless you fight at 154. Then you can get there. Unless you haven't had a big win in 6 years, then you can get there. This is all so easy to see, fellas. It's not hard to see anymore. You have to not want to see it, to not see it. This is all easy to see. You have a guy at 147 who you stay away from. You're advised to stay away from. You're advised to stay away from him. Just stay away. You don't want to mess with this guy. Stay away. And then when this guy is forced to go in different directions, and look, I've said in the past, Bud Crawford has done some things business-wise that funny to me too. Suing Top Rank on the way out, burning that bridge when you could have worked with them. If it didn't work with Al, it's not a good bridge to burn. It's not a good move. Not a good move. That petty lawsuit, not a good move. Not a good move. There are things he could have done differently too. He's not above any type of criticism at all. But this right here, this picture is easy to see. It's easy to see why Boots Ennis is no longer in the WBO because he went the IBF route. Now he's got the interim championship. Now we're not asking for Bud versus Boots anymore, are we? We knew Bud would have a mandatory in 2023. These ratings that I throw out, I don't throw them out to mock Tank Davis or his fans. It's 61,000, fellas. You're telling me that this guy is one of the top 5 draws in the sport. If he's one of the top 5 draws in the sport, he's got to do more than 61,000 on a pay-per-view, and he certainly has to do more than peaking at 124,000 views, 124,000 viewers for the replay. The replay historically, despite how good the fight was or not, historically has been larger than the actual pay-per-view as far as viewers. He's peaking at 124,000 viewers on the replay of a pay-per-view in which he knocked a guy out. And you're telling me he's this. They're telling me he's a cash cow. So if he's a cash cow and he's doing these numbers, if Errol's a cash cow and he's doing his numbers, how is it that in a decade we've gone from that to 2012 when Cotto versus Trout, 1.4 million. Guerrero versus Berto. This is a Guerrero versus Berto, 1.1 million. Chavez Jr. versus Rubio, 1.9 million. Chavez Jr. versus Andy Lee, 1.6 million. These are 2012 numbers. HBO and Showtime. Bernard Hopkins, Chad Dawson, 1.6 million. Broner versus Acevedo, 1.4 million. I also want you to notice that these are fights between name fighters, real championship fights, championship caliber fights between name fighters that aren't on pay-per-view. And compare and contrast that to today, 2023, when they want to put every fight between name fighters on pay-per-view. Donaire versus Arce, 1.3 million in a lower weight class fight. Pacquiao versus Marquez 4, replay, 1.4. Khan versus Molina, 616,000 on Showtime. Khan versus Molina, Showtime, 616,000. Santa Cruz did 1.5 million on CBS, and that's households. CBS, but that's households. Ward versus Dawson. And while we're speaking on CBS, I don't want to lose my train of thought here. I was told 7, 8, 9 years ago, don't worry that HBO is going out the building. Don't worry that the class of the sport when it comes to the network is going out the building, because now we've got boxing for all on network TV. We've got CBS, we've got NBC, we got Fox. And you fast forward to 2013 and we got none of that. None of it. None of it. I ain't got free boxing. I got 2.5 months of paying $600 to access all these fights on top of the subscriptions that I pay. That's what I got. I've got the entity that promised me free boxing for all on network TV, charging me extra for 4 fights possibly in a 5 to 6 week period. That's what I've got. And on top of that, I've got fans telling me to stop complaining about it. Not going to stop complaining about it. I'm not. You dudes have Stockholm syndrome. This entity was literally telling you free boxing for all. We're going to put it on network TV. We're going to purge these other outfits of their fighters. We're going to build this huge UFC model. We're going to have our own belts, all of that. And they didn't do any of it. They didn't deliver on any of it. And I had DAZN telling me the same thing. They're not above criticism either. We're going away from the pay-per-view model. You pay the subscription, you get access to Canelo, you get access to Anthony Joshua, you get access to all the great fights, and you don't have to pay extra money for it other than the subscription that we're charging you per month. And what do we get? Pay-per-view. 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 Liars. They're liars. They're liars. When has Showtime ever created a pay-per-view star? All of them needed HBO Stardust to this day. And that's another thing. PBC is not out here creating stars because they can't. It's impossible with their model. For the new age boxing fan, new age media who is trying to convince people that this is the golden age of boxing. It's the golden age of boxing. This is the new. This is the new. You old guys, y'all need to realize this is a new way of operating. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. None of this is making sense. The dollars aren't making sense. You have to build stars the traditional way. You've got to keep them active. You've got to keep them in front of people's faces. They have to be exciting. Or the Mayweather is... The next Mayweather is not walking through the door. And I'm convinced that these dudes don't realize that either. This is the next Mayweather. It's the next Mayweather. There's not a next Mayweather, fellas. You're not going to have a dude coasting to decision victories, walking to the ring with a burglar outfit on, bragging that he's robbing you of your money, while you cheer for him robbing you of your money. Perfectly polarizing the market, not knocking guys out. That guy is not walking through that door. It's one of one. He's one of one. It's not going to happen again. He's one of one. Just like there's not going to be another Manny Pacquiao. I dropped the Manny Pacquiao video on my channel last night. This dude fought in 65% of boxing's weight classes. I don't think there's some people that don't realize that still. He fought in 65% of boxing's weight classes. This dude fought in 11 of 17 weight classes. 11. Even if some of these 8 championships were a little easier and were at a catch weight, he fought in 11 of the 17 weight classes. These guys are not walking through that building. Inoue is about to move up to 122. That's his 5th weight class. And then when you get to that, like when you start to get to weight class number 5, like Broner, right? Broner started around 126 and he made his way up to 147, right? 30, 35, 44. That's around the 5th weight class. Once you start getting that, that's when you start to hit your ceiling, right? Canelo started at 147, I think, at the very beginning of his career. 54, 60, 68, 75, 5th weight class. Once you start to hit that 5th weight class, that's when it starts to become a little too much. Weight-wise, there's weight class for a reason. So when a dude bursts through that ceiling, and I don't care what the hell this dude's on, 11 weight classes, these dudes are not walking through that door again. In a way, as great as he is, I think he's the pound-for-pound king. He's not the next Pacquiao. He's not. The next Pacquiao is not walking through the door. The next Mayweather is not walking through the door. We've got to build superstars some kind of way. Oscar De La Hoya became a superstar amongst other superstars. And then he was a generous superstar in that he gave guys like Arturo Gatti, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, access to his fans by B-sides on the pay-per-view, and nobody did better at taking advantage of that than Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. And they became superstars that were catapulted to superstardom off of the back of winning against Oscar De La Hoya on pay-per-views. Who are these guys going to clout chase off of? And right now, even if guys are beating a Canelo Alvarez, who is the current superstar, he's the current version of Oscar De La Hoya. Even those guys are not taking that win. If they are to beat Canelo, they're not going to take that win and run with it. The current model does not, it's not going to give them access to superstardom. The current model isn't, it's not going to keep them active enough. It didn't do it before they fight Canelo. It's not going to do it after. It's not sustainable. So where's the next superstar going to come from? Where's he going to come from? And superstars can come from anywhere. Great talent comes from anywhere. Any talent scout will tell you that. Singing, basketball. They're finding basketball talent from everywhere. They're finding great UFC fighters, MMA fighters in small villages, several great pockets of MMA fighters in small villages. They can come from anywhere and become great fighters and possibly superstars. But it's not happening in boxing. It's not. There's that signal should be going off right now. It should be going off. It should be, we need to get going on building somebody. We need to be warming somebody up in the bullpen. Canelo, he's not going to stay active forever, fellas. In his 30s, that window getting smaller and smaller each year, each fight. Anthony Joshua, same thing. Smaller. You need to have superstars in the waiting. You should have some made already. Errol Spence Jr. ain't cutting it, fellas. Tank Davis ain't cutting it, fellas. Unless they divert course and get to fighting top competition consistently, actively. It's not happening. It's not happening. You got to get it going. So 61,000 pay-per-view buys. Yeah, but it was against Hector Luis Garcia. You told me Hector Luis Garcia was a talented guy. You told me he was a great fighter. You told me that this fight could sell. Now, all of a sudden, it's because he fought Hector Luis Garcia. And I got news for the Tank Davis fans. If this fight with Ryan Garcia happens, this is new territory for Tank Davis. It's been a long time, if ever, to where he's been in close odds fight. He needs to show up early in that fight. He can't take 4 or 5 rounds off. He's got to show up early. That's number one. Number two, that fight has to sell. It's got to sell. That's not an inexpensive overmatched B-side like what he's been fighting. Tank can sell 61,000 pay-per-views and get away with it because the pay-per-view is cheap. But this once again goes to what I'm talking about with not building stars. And people get mad. The Mayweather guys get mad at me when I say this stuff. Is Mayweather Promotions did not promote this guy to his maximum capacity. You can say, yes, he sells Washington, D.C., Atlanta, New York, Vegas, L.A. He sells on all these places. Look at the live gates. But Tank Davis can be a much bigger star than he is now had you not put him on pay-per-view after pay-per-view after pay-per-view against overmatched B-sides. This is where we're at. These are all fights. Lennox was best. These are all fights that could be happening. I'm a glutton for punishment. I love punishment. And there were other things I wanted to talk about today. Anyway, moving up to 122. We'll get to that because I'm going to do a show Thursday and I'm going to do a show Saturday as well. And thoughts on Eubank Jr. Not a big fan of Eubank Jr. and he's fighting Liam Smith. And by the way, I think Liam Smith is undervalued at 3.5 to 1. And I'm closely looking at what the betting odds will be for a decision in that fight. Just decision, because I think you can make it easy. Just decision in that fight if the odds are good. Because I don't think either. I think Liam Smith has been knocked out one time in his career to much superior opposition. Eubank Jr. hasn't been. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Appreciate y'all swinging through. See y'all tomorrow. And y'all look out for the short form videos. Short form videos are up there on the channel. Y'all be on the lookout for those. Be dropping out some more later today. And HCP will be back on D-Styles channel on Monday. Peace. God bless.